All right. Well, hello. I am here with Todd Vogt, four-time U.S. national team rower and 2024 Paralympian, who's medaled at both the World Rowing Championships and the Para Rowing to Paris Regatta, named the 2024 U.S. Rowing Male Athlete of the Year. And since finding the sport of rowing, he's become a passionate advocate for adaptive sport. Off the water, he's a movie buff, a coffee lover, an aspiring author who is inspired by his journey with Parkinson's. So, welcome, Todd. Thanks so much. And we're obviously not entirely new to each other. We do know each other, but I wanted to just give that introduction for you.
Yeah,
So,
thanks for having me.
yeah, you're welcome. Thanks so much for joining. So, we wanted to go into just some of your background. So, people who may not be familiar with the life of an adaptive athlete and your disability is, and get to know a little bit more about your background, your challenges, the Paralympics, and a reflection on anything you do for advocacy. So, just to start off, you want to share a little bit about your background and how you got into the sport of rowing?
Yeah, I should say just as an overview, I'm 50 years old, so I'm a little older. I live in Portland, Oregon, and as you mentioned, I have Parkinson. I have what's called young onset Parkinson's disease. I was diagnosed coming up on 7 years, 2018. I got started rowing back in the fall of my freshman year of college at University of Buffalo. I saw a flyer outside my dorm room that said, "Get fit, meet friends," and I thought, all right, that sounded good. Yeah, actually, funny story in that with this is my roommate Mike, who I went to high school with. We both saw the flyer outside. We went to the informational meeting, and there's like 100 people in the student union, and the coach played this video of the coach had a couple interesting things. First of all, he played a video of like a major international collegiate race, like an 8-person race, all these boats, and it looked really exciting. Like it was people yelling at each other, coxswains, there's grunting and groaning, and the rowers, as they crossed the finish line of the race, were slumped over their oars, like from the physical exertion. So I remember thinking to myself, like, that looks fun. Like I can do that to myself, And I also think I thought, like, if like a prereq, if it requires hurting yourself to be good at the sport, like I think I can do that, So those are my initial thoughts. So I went to the first practice. I was like pretty much hooked, like from the beginning, like the first couple practices. The funny thing, going back to what I was saying before, I was like hooked from the beginning. My roommate Mike, by the same token, like went to the first practice and never went back. So, yeah. So I guess everybody's into different things. So I rowed all throughout college, all 4 years of college. I was team captain my senior year. After college, I continued to row at sort of club level, I guess you would say, for a while, and then sort of just transitioned into being a master's rower, master's meaning like an adult person, an adult with like a job and a life, but also was still does some rowing and some competing. And let's see, like other relevant. So that's where my life was for quite a while. The only other thing that happened that I think is relevant to the story is around 2008, I started coaching rowing, starting with high school kids, juniors, and master's rowers. Then eventually coaching some small college teams and some bigger college teams too as well. So that's where I was up until about 2017, where I started to notice like my physical health was like something was off. I could tell that the fall of 2017, like I just felt bad, for lack of a better reason. And then started getting a tremor in the winter of 2018. Then the diagnostic process took like 6 months to identify it as Parkinson's. So yeah, I don't know, maybe that's a good place to pause, but I can continue there. I guess like the reason I wanted to stop there is, yeah, I think all this, my background stuff is relevant to is relevant for when I got diagnosed with Parkinson's. So
yeah. So what is, just so folks understand a little bit more, you mentioned tremors, but what is Parkinson's and how do people acquire that?
Yeah, it's a neurologic condition where your brain doesn't produce dopamine, which is, the section of your brain that normally makes dopamine is damaged for whatever reason. It's not really known, either some sort of genetic factors or a combination of genetic and environmental factors. And for me, Parkinson's disease can bring a variety of symptoms depending on the person. For, the common ones are like I have a pretty significant tremor in my left hand and my left foot. My left arm like doesn't swing when I walk. That was one of the first things I noticed. And there's like some random muscle cramping, dystonia. But the other thing I have that I noticed as well is like I just felt like I just feel way more fatigued in a weird way. Like I was like, that was one of the first things I noticed in the fall of 2017 was that, well, two things. Like I just felt like I was having a hard time getting through workouts. I was preparing for this big race in October in Boston every October, which is what that's called the Head of the Charles. So I was doing my normal Head of the Charles fall training for this group, for this boat I was going to row in. That whole fall, I just felt like weak and tired. And I also just felt like my rowing stroke, which I'd spent 20 years sort of honing, was suddenly off and weird. It felt like I was rowing poorly. But at the time, when I first had those symptoms, I didn't think much of it. I just thought I was getting old, for lack of a better answer or whatever. I was 43. I was like, okay, I guess I'm just getting old, So, but then those feelings like the tremor increased all through the winter and spring. So that's when I started to think like something might be majorly wrong. So yeah, I would see a naturopath first, and I still didn't think anything was wrong. She did all this blood work. It all came back normal. And that's when she said to me like, hey, I think there's something serious here. So
Was there so as far as your rowing, in other ways, did your life change, and how has it changed since before you acquired your disability?
Yeah, I mean, when I first got diagnosed, I remember thinking like three things like went through my head. Like, first of all, what's this going to mean for my relationship with my wife? Like, is she going to have to take care of me at some point? Like, and so that was one of my first thoughts. The other thought was I was coaching full time. I was the head coach of a local rowing program, and which was I was doing everything. It was a very demanding job, and I didn't think I could physically do that anymore. I just wondered if that would even be a possibility. And then the last thing I thought, like at the same time, I also thought, well, there goes my days as like a competitive rower. I just couldn't see how I could be competitive. I didn't see how I could compete as a rower anymore, just feeling the way I was feeling. So yeah, like those are my three sort of main thoughts initially after diagnosis. And yeah, and those are a bummer. Like I had my life my life set up for what I wanted to be. I wanted to coach. I wanted to continue being like a full-time coach. And I enjoyed doing like the masters racing I was doing, in the fall and spring. So, and suddenly like, I thought all that was gone basically. So
what do you think? So now as, fast forward a little bit, you thought that some of those things would go away. Have they? I mean, you went on to so you competed before, and then now you're shifting over to your view of like how do people compete with disabilities, or what is the difference between what was your thinking about your participation before and the way it is now?
I mean, it was kind of similar after I got diagnosed. One thing I should say within sort of my story, well, I guess what happened next. So I guess what was good for being I was thoroughly immersed in the rowing world, I guess you would say, when I got diagnosed, right? Between being a coach and a competitive rower and being just sort of obsessed with the sport, which actually kind of worked to my benefit because I knew about the Paralympics. I knew that the Paralympics was a thing. I knew that there was I knew that there was rowing in the Paralympics as well. And I knew there was you could compete. I knew there were competitions and races for adaptive, or what do you want to say, like Paralympic or adaptive athletes within the sport of rowing. So I remember like a couple months after getting diagnosed, I remember thinking to myself like, well, what does it take to sort of get designated or classified as a para athlete, to just do like some local competitions, or even what does it take to make what does it take to make it on, to get onto sort of maybe potentially, I remember thinking the Paralympic national team. This is fall of 2018, right? This is when this was. So I looked up, I just did some hunting on the internet and found the information about getting classified, or meaning designated as a para athlete. I remember reading all the description of what it takes to get classified, and I sort of checked like all the boxes basically. I was like, yes, I have this. Yes, I have this. So I remember after reading that, I was encouraged because I thought to myself, like, I think I can get classified. I think my symptoms will classify me to be a para athlete or adaptive athlete. So I was like, all right, maybe. Then the next thing, luckily, that like I was saying, being a little bit of a rowing nerd, I guess you would say, I hunted on the internet for the speeds on the rowing machine of international para rowers. So just for the audience, I know you know this, obviously, what I'm going to say, but the rowing machine is like a really good assessment of potential, your potential as a rower. So luckily, like the United States, I think I found like the Germans, Italians, the French, and the Great Britain, and from Great Britain, I found all of the speeds of a lot of the international like Paralympic rowers who would have been in my class, which is called PR3. So I found a bunch of the times on the rowing machine for the PR3 rowers around, both on the U.S. national Paralympic national team and around the world. And I realized I was like right sort of square where I was, at least right before I got diagnosed. I was like, my speed on the rowing machine put me right sort of in the middle of that group. I was not necessarily the top, but I was faster than the slowest guys. So yeah, at that point, I remember thinking, okay, I think I can get classified. And I think I'm, within a similar speed range of some of these international para rowers. So now I'm really excited. This is like winter of 2018. So at that point, again, I just reached out. I just did some more hunting on the internet and found within U.S. rowing, and I figured out who the head coach or the director of the program of the Paralympic rowing program for the U.S. was. Her name's Ellen Misner. So I found this woman, Ellen, who's the high performance director for para rowing within the U.S., and I just emailed her out of the blue and explained my situation to her. And she had me do a bunch of workouts on the rowing machine. She had me send her video of myself on the water, and at that point I hadn't been classified. So she's like, if I sent her that info, the rowing machine workouts and the video of me rowing, she's like, yeah, if you can get classified by whatever it was, she gave me a deadline, like May 1st, whatever. If you can get, this is in winter, this is like March or February. She's like, if you can get classified by this deadline, you can come to the camp, the camp that will select the rowers to row at the World Championships for the U.S. in the Paralympic events. So I like scrambled again to figure out how to get classified and got it done like the weekend before the deadline. And there it is. And then like I got invited, then I was like, I'm coming to camp. So there you go. That sort of got the ball rolling. So
Right. Would you say like, so it sounds like having the opportunity, knowing that there were opportunities out there for you to be competitive, helped you deal with your disability?
Yes, certainly. Yeah. I think it definitely helped. Yeah, I mean, it was a way to sort of, channel all the energy into like a positive way, So, yeah, I guess maybe it allowed me to live in a little bit of denial too, I guess, So like it allowed me to sort of push back the fact of my disability a little bit, but on the whole, it was good because it allowed me to do something very positive. Also, for me personally, it did something cool in that when I was in my 20s, like after college, I had like an inkling of wanting to try to make the able-bodied national team, but at that point, like I knew it was going to take a lot of work, which was fine, but I couldn't figure out how I was going to live and train 3 times a day, so I like couldn't figure out how to make that happen. So I never really took a shot at the national team when I was in my 20s. So here suddenly I like get to this opportunity to potentially like fulfill my rowing dreams, which is kind of strange to think about. I don't know. That's like the strange thing about my situation sometimes, I think, is like I have this thing that's like, this disease that's not necessarily great, but it causes me a lot of like struggle, but at the same time, it allows me to like fulfill my rowing fantasies, I guess you'd say.
Right. Yeah. That is the dichotomy of that is kind of interesting, like that you can appreciate it at the same time that it's not something you necessarily wanted to have.
Yeah, exactly.
Oftentimes people, I've just thought of this, and it wasn't a question we thought of before, but a lot of times people say, do you wish you didn't have this? Or, or when people, how do you like want people to look at you in terms of like, oh, I'm so lucky that I don't have Parkinson's or this or that. Like, what would you say back to them?
Yeah, I do ask myself this sort of philosophical question quite a bit, actually, or have during the process the last couple, since 2019. If I had the option to never have Parkinson's, but never have the opportunity to, go back in a time machine and change, the past, and, never have Parkinson's, but never have this cool opportunity to go represent the country and do all that cool stuff. Like, what would I choose to do? And I don't know. Sometimes I don't exactly know the answer sometimes. I think after a little reflection, I think for a while I thought honestly, like I would rather, I don't know. I went back and forth with both sides of the answer for this, but I think what I've come to feel about it is I wouldn't change it. You know, it's been it's been like a really amazing experience, especially like the Paralympics themselves. You know,
Yeah.
we'll talk about
Right.
more eventually. So
Right.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it is an interesting question. So, which I've asked my other teammates before. I've asked them the same question.
Well, it's sort of at this point, I mean, it's sort of like it's not really something you can change.
Yeah,
So
yeah, obviously.
instead,
Yeah.
it's more like, are you happy with the person you are and the opportunities now that you've been able to have? If you hadn't had those opportunities, or and people hadn't, at least given you chances, how would you feel?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a. I'm not sure if I'm answering this question directly, but yeah, like I said, I wouldn't say my life was perfect before diagnosis, but I had my life set up doing what I wanted to do. I was coaching full time I was running a rowing program. I coached collegiately, which is what I kind of envisioned my future being. And then I had like a lot of, I was still pretty fit and I still pretty rowed well and had a lot of like rowing friends and went to some races. So which was fulfilling as well. So all of that sort of got trashed, like to a certain extent. But now at the same time, it opened up a whole new world, like even better world almost,
Right.
So
So the next thing maybe we can talk about is just about the challenges and the supports, maybe organizations that have made it possible for you to be the best that you can be.
yeah. Yeah, let's see. There's been a bunch of different. I've had support from a lot of different sort of things. Let's see. First thing, practically speaking, is my wife has been super supportive of this whole operation the last 5 years. Like with me being gone for months at a time. And the thing is, she has like the real job that pays the mortgage, right, and allows me to train full time. Because during this time, I received a stipend for a while. For the last couple of years, I was receiving a stipend from the U.S. Olympic Committee and getting health insurance through the U.S. Olympic Committee, which is great. And I was working part time. Like for a while there, I was doing I was coaching a little bit part time. It depended on the year, which year, but I was doing things like driving for DoorDash and coaching and doing personal training. So, but all that stuff wouldn't have paid the bill. So luckily, I had a spouse who had allowed me to be was okay with me being gone a lot and being tired all the time and hungry and so that was great. That like really helped a lot. But there's all kinds of other things too. Like U.S. Rowing did provide that other support too, somewhat a little bit of money and some health insurance, things like that. And I don't know, there's a bunch of other things too. I had another small group. There's another nonprofit organization called SPIDworks that supported me for a couple of years. They just like help sort of pre-elite athletes or elite athletes. So like things like that really helped. And I don't know, and there's probably a lot more that I'm missing. Like, the rowing club I row at, they were really enthusiastic. They gave me free, they like let me use basically any of the equipment and sort of commandeer any of the club equipment, So there's been a lot of like small things like that, sort of that all add up to make it happen,
So, and then the challenges of dealing with your disability and then trying to train.
Oh yeah, okay. So
What you
challenge.
mentioned already.
There are plenty of challenges that
I'd say physical, mental, logistical.
Oh, for sure, yeah, on so many levels. Like on a practice, like let's start physical. Yeah, so Parkinson's impacts my rowing, like I said, in two main ways. Like the more important way is like my whole left side doesn't work well. My sort of balance is a little funky, not that much, but compared to what it was before. So my rowing stroke is just not the same as it once was. So I feel like I have to be a lot more thoughtful in the way I row because I just can't row as well as I used to do. Because like, for example, my left arm really doesn't want to fully extend, which is, when you're rowing, you want to have your arms pretty much straight when you're during the propulsion phase. You want to transmit the energy of your legs from, through the oar handle out through like as efficiently as possible. So it's like, yeah, my rowing stroke is just a little funky and weird, which drives me crazy actually. But I've tried to like do all kinds of things. Like I try to do really thoughtful. It's forced me to be like really thoughtful about it. Like trying different like boat types and different ways to construct the rigger and different oar handles. And different drills and like taking video and I don't know, and like doing any sort of figuring out like I bought like a special oar lock for my bow. So doing all this stuff to try to like maximize my technical, what I still have. So.
And has it changed over time? And what is a prognosis for you?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, my rowing technique does continue to sort of devolve, unfortunately. And it's okay. Like it's getting worse. I can sense it. And luckily, like it held together my body like held together over the last 5 years, but it's getting a little worse. At some point, there's a sad reality where I probably won't be able to row the one person, the single as it's called anymore, just because it's getting like my ability to like hang on to my left oar is like becoming compromised. Like, and if that's a problem, if you lose in a single, like you can flip and go in the water really easily. So at some point it might become dangerous to row the single. I don't think I'm there yet, but I can see that future's on the horizon. But that's okay. Like I can still row doubles and quads and eights and things like that. So there'll still be lots of opportunities. So the other thing that Parkinson's does that's to me physically, I guess, is like I mentioned this before, but like I just feel more fatigued. It's like it's harder to like really push myself physically. Like sometimes my brain just like doesn't have that capacity as much as it used to, which is annoying and frustrating. So I've almost had to I kind of felt like I had to brute force like my body to a certain extent. Like, so I couldn't necessarily push myself as hard as I feel like I used to be able to. So in order to compensate, I have to train more basically. So I always felt like, and also there's a practical reality. I'm like older than everybody typically. So, I mean, I kind of felt like I had to train harder than everybody to sort of have even similar results that my teammates, so.
Yeah. Have you ever had the situation where somebody might have asked you, like, you don't look disabled, what's your disability, or are you even disabled, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can hide it like moderately well, depending on where my medication is at. So, yeah. Actually, the other thing that happens a lot along the same lines that people say, and might be relevant to hopefully people watching this video, is that I've had several people. This happens actually on a semi-regular basis. Somebody will say, how are you racing and rowing at the Paralympics? Like, I didn't think you could. I didn't think that Parkinson's was qualifies you for the Paralympics. So I think the problem is that there's I think people think about the Paralympics is that you have to have a specific like condition, and that is what makes you eligible to be in the Paralympics. If I'm articulating this, what they don't realize, you can really have any sort of physical disability. It's not necessarily having a clearly defined disability or condition. It's how whatever the symptoms of your disease or your situation is, how it directly impacts you. So yeah, my Parkinson's, like, because of the lack of coordination in my left hand, that allows me to be a Paralympic athlete. So I don't know if I'm articulating it correctly. So
that makes sense.
It's not that you have a disease like or a condition like whether you're like a single leg amputee or you have, I don't know, like a club foot or something like that. Like just having those things in and of themselves doesn't classify you for the Paralympics. It's how your disease impacts your athletic ability. So
right.
Either a lot or a little.
And so you wouldn't necessarily qualify for every single sport at the Paralympics either then.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I first, if I would have got diagnosed maybe a year or two before, I mean, I had symptoms like going back a year or two before I got diagnosed when I look back on it. So if I would have got diagnosed, say I got diagnosed in 2016, for example, and tried to get classified, my symptoms were so minimal, I might not have classified at that point because my symptoms are so minimal. Mm-hmm. So, but when I actually, like in 2019, when I went and got classified, my symptoms were such that they negatively impact my ability to row. So yeah. I guess that's the important thing for others. Like, because some people might say to themselves, well, I have this thing. Well, it's not necessarily like that bad, or, it's not necessarily something I've seen at the Paralympics before for people having, if whatever you have negatively like impacts your body, you could potentially classify as a para-athlete. So is my point.
Right. Right. And I mean, bottom line is you do have a disability and a need for accommodation if it negatively impacts you. And it's not a bad thing that you would need it, that you are asking for it or that kind of thing. Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, so you talked about you mentioned the Paralympic Games. Let's hear a little bit more about that experience and walk us through that journey. You've told us a little bit about that, but some of the highlights of your journey to the Paralympic Games. What did it take to get there? And what was it like competing on the global stage?
Oh, it was amazing. But it was amazing being in Paris at the games. I think maybe I'll step back and say like how the process. So, there's a couple things that happened in 2021. I was there. Only well, I rode at the Paralympics last summer. I rode in what was called the PR3 mixed double scull. So PR3 is my Paralympic category. Mixed double scull means one man, one woman. Double scull means two people, and each person has 2 oars, and there's 2 oars, 1 oar in each hand. So in 2021 for the Tokyo, all right, let me say the double was a new event for the 2024 Paralympics. In 2021, the only event, there was only one boat that was eligible. There was only one boat competed at the Paralympics. It was a 4-person mixed gendered boat. So 2 men, 2 women, 1 oar each. It's a 4 sort of sweet boat, and PR3. Anyway, so I didn't make that boat. I was the alternate. I got named the alternate. So technically I made the team, but I didn't travel or get any gear or anything like that. So, but I remember thinking I actually almost thought about retiring after 2021 because I was always like finishing up like 3rd in the hierarchy of selection, which is a bummer because there's only 2 seats in the 4, right? So I was like, okay, for the last 2 years I've been 3rd in the hierarchy, and there's always like some young guys who are fit and row well, and like so it feels like I'm never going to actually get in this boat. Like maybe I had a couple good years, maybe I should just retire. However, then the double was added to the Paralympic program, so suddenly like there's 1 more seat. So suddenly there are 3 seats now, and suddenly I'm always ending up 3rd in the hierarchy, right? And suddenly there's 3 seats now. So I'm like, all right, this is my opportunity. Anyway, so that like encouraged me to stick around and train some more, and with the goal of trying to make it into that boat. I think a couple of critical things that happened in 2023. I got hooked up with a really good partner. We went to the World Championships and we finished in 2nd, which was awesome. After that was in September of 2023. So I knew that the important selection camp, the camp that would select the people going to Paris, was in December of 2024. So I remember thinking to myself after the World Championships, like in 23, like this is only like selection's only like 3-4 months away. So like if I just go home, buckle down, this is my boat, Yeah. So I did get invited to camp. It was challenging. Like it was tough. Like I barely made the boat really. Yeah. But it was like, I did make the boat, but it was close. So that, back in January 24 was when I was officially knew I was going to Paris. So we trained all that spring and summer, and then went to the games, which was awesome. Like the Olympic Village, like
pause for 1 second. I'm just going to pause the recording for 1 second.